Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is Richard Kang, and today we will learn about the World War One, as known as the Great War. And these are the table of contents. So today's video, we're only gonna work on the background, and rest four of them will be dealt into separate videos. So the background of the World War One has a lot to do with the Eurocentralism and how things were done in the European continent at the time. So to begin with, we have to know about the Belle Epoque, which means good time in French. So right after the Franco-Prussian War, the inside the European continent, there hasn't been any of a major military conflict, and thereby since there were no wars, all the countries in the European continent has some advancements in every aspect of the life. The birth rate has gone up, less poor people and more growth in the middle classes, and and some heavy technological advancements and other things like that. And they thought this good time will continue forever, but it did not, obviously. And the rise of ethno-nationalism. So ethno-nationalism is that people in certain nations are strengthening the idea of ethnicity should rule the country, such as pan-Slavism, which means the land of the Slavic people must be ruled by Slavic country. And pan-Germanism is also one, which is the idea that wherever the German people lives or Germanic people lives, the land should be governed by the German government. And this kind of conflicts because, there are tons and tons of ethnicities inside the European continent, and they didn't really like each other at all. So that is one of the problem. And the third one is that the world politics, or in German, Weltpolitik. So this was done by the young leader, William II. And since he was a young leader and he didn't have much of a background or any sort of reasons to rule the country, he didn't have any of that. So he was quite focused on gaining the colonies. And Germany didn't really had any colonies because Prussians have united Germany for a short time at the time, and they didn't really have that power to gain the colonies overseas. So they had to seek some market that they can sell their products to, which is a colony usually. And Franco-Prussian War has a lot to do with this because of the Franco-Prussian War, the the French and the French and the Prussian, or the Germans, didn't really like each other. Yeah, so that's about it. And Romanticism and nationalism is also another one. So due to the Belle Epoque, the Romanticism has risen up, and they thought everything will go well, like optimists. And because of that, they have some nationalistic things. So they thought they had the strongest military in the Europe. So each of the countries, they thought it like that because there hasn't been any major conflicts and major military conflicts in the European continent, and all the news is that people hear is that they won a big fight overseas in the colonies, which is quite unfair because the Europeans at the time had a better technologies and a better military, while on the other hand, the colonies on the overseas didn't really have that. So they thought they were the strongest. That was the bias, if you will, but there was some sort of a reason they thought it that way. And the arrogance of rationalists. So, and because of that, Eurocentrism. So, rationalists at the time were quite thinking that they can be the center of the world, and it is also related with the Belle Epoque thing. So they thought the world is peaceful right now, peaceful, yeah, but they didn't really see what's underneath them. They didn't really see the conflicts between the ethno nationalism or the other things in there. And they thought if if we all think rationally, then the war wouldn't happen. That's what they thought, but that was their arrogance. It doesn't really work that way, yeah. And the Balkans. So the Balkan had some problem because it has so much nationalities and so much countries inside them. And and since the Balkan Peninsula was really uh, important land for all the parties in the Europe, and Ottomans really loved it. So because of that, they were supported by all the other countries, and there has been some very big conflicts in there. The Russians wanted the Balkans, the Austro-Hungarians wanted the Balkans, the Ottomans wanted the Balkans, and they supported each other's parties in there, and all these ethnicities and nationalities and all the other ideologies, they all clashed in the Balkans, and there has been some major conflicts in there. And the fall of Ottoman Empire. So the Ottoman Empire was a really strong axis of the power at the time, but so before like hundreds or 200 years in the World War One perspective, the Ottoman was one of the strongest empire, but their power has, you know, fallen. So they didn't really have any uh, political power to unite the whole empire, and the corruption of Yenicheri, or the military or the bureaucracy, has really affected the Ottomans. And at the perspective at the time of the 1914 or 1910s, the Ottoman Empire wasn't really strong after all. They did have some very huge territories, and the population was really high, but that's all they had. And the Russians eager for the ice-free ports, because you know when you go up north, the salt water doesn't really get salty at all because of the rotation of the earth. And because of that, when it is in the winter, the ports in there freeze, and you cannot really use that frozen port, do you? So the Russians, they really wanted the ice-free ports so they can trade things in the winter, and they can project they can uh project their naval power in the winter too. So they really eager to gain the ice-free ports, which is related to the Russo-Japanese War. So the Russians and Japanese had some conflicts in the Far East, or in Korea, near Korean Peninsula, where I came from, and there has been some conflicts and other things like that, and the Russians kind of lost, which wasn't good for Korea, because the Japanese after that Japanese gained the power and colonized Korea, but it is what it is. And Yun Ekul, I'm terrible at French, so I don't know how to pronounce this, but this is a this is a sort of how can I say this? It is some sort of a group of military officers inside the French military. So what they thought was that instead of making a big battleships, they thought, why don't we just make small torpedo boats and call it a day? And they really did that. The way and because of various reasons, it didn't really work that way. So these were some background informations for the World War I, and this, yeah. And there is a sorry, sorry. So there's a quote by Otto von Bismarck, which is about the Balkans. So if there is ever another war in the Europe, it'll come out of some damned silly thing in the Balkans. And he was quite accurate about it, because that one thing in the Balkans kind of ignited the war. So this is the cause, and so this is about it for today, and I will see you later.